I can't tell you how many times I'm on an airplane flying somewhere, and someone will come up to me or maybe even sit next to me. It's happened, and they say to me, "Are you Father Frank?" And I say, "Yes, I am. Well, do you remember me?" And I said, "No, white hair, getting old, I don't remember. My memory's not that good." And they say, "Well, you baptized my children many years ago." "Oh, yes, yes." And I begin to remember. Or they might say, which is a little bit more embarrassing for me, they say, "You married me when you were in Houston or in New York or Boca." And I said, "Well, you've changed." It gives me a chance to say something back to them. And we start talking, and then I begin to recall that experience. But I often also get people who say to me, "Do you remember me?" And I'll look at them, and I'll say, "Yes, I buried your father, didn't I?" And they say, "Yes." I remember for one reason or another the families for whom I have done funeral services for. And you might find that somewhat odd. But after this sermon, I think you might change your opinion about that. You know, we all should wonder, and we should care, what our legacy is. When we die, as we all will, and we have our funeral, and our friends and our relatives and other individuals come to pay their last respects, what will they say about us? What phrase, what characterizes our life? Because that's what people will do. They always do it. They do it at the Macaria, they do it at the funeral home, they do it at the church, they see each other at the cemetery. "Ah, yes, Odade," and they start talking about he was this, she was that, this or the other thing. So when we think about our own death, after we have lived hopefully a long life, what words will people use to describe us? Isn't that really the point, isn't it? And I think that is why I remember, not everyone, I remember certain individuals that I have buried, because I knew them, I knew their life, and they made a mark on me. So having been, as a priest, we have the privilege to be with people when they are brought into the world at the time of birth, sometimes in a difficult way. And we are also at the gates when people leave this world, and I have been at both. I've been in the operatory and actually baptized two twin girls that I could hold in the palm of my hand, both of them. I had them both in the palm of my hand, and I baptized them. In the operatory, with their parents, obviously, the father was there. Those two girls grew up now, and they are grown women. And whenever they see me, they hug me, and we are very close. So I was at their birth, and I buried their grandmother at the same time. I was with her when she died in the hospital. So we as priests, we have this opportunity to be with people when they come into this world, and they have the opportunity, a whole lifetime ahead of them, to make their mark. And we are at the end, when people, we total it up and we say, she was this, he was that. I share that with you because this is the purpose of this morning's epistle lesson. This is a very important epistle lesson that the Church Fathers chose to put on this, the fourth Sunday of the Pentecostale. We focus oftentimes on the man, the paralytic, who was cured at Bethesda. But there's more to today than just that. The epistle lesson, all the epistle lessons in the Pentecostalium are from the book of Acts. So the book of Acts are not epistles. They are the acts of the church, the actions of the people. And the Church Fathers intentionally, the only time in the church liturgical year when it's all from the book of Acts, from the first chapter, and it goes through the book. Pericopes, the church fathers take pieces and they show them to us as, so what was the impact of the resurrection on the church? What happened after the people experienced Jesus dying and rising from the dead? And we see, as I mentioned last week, that the church grew and more people were coming and gathering because of the resurrection. And I lamented with you the fact that in the Orthodox Church, after Easter, it's completely the opposite, where it becomes less and less people coming to church. Until at the summertime we take the apopes, we take vacations away from the church, because we think that, well, we went during Great Lent and Holy Week, we have a lot of stars, next to our name, so I can now take my leave. I have marks, I have credits to my name. And yet, the book of Acts is the complete opposite. If we have reignited ourselves to Christ, we should be more zealous, we should be more interested, we should be coming and receiving the body and blood of our resurrected Lord, Saint Christos Anesti, and receiving Him, hearing the words of the gospel, and growing in our faith. It is in that mode that the church fathers on this Sunday say, let's look at a woman who died in a small city. So you say, of all of the things that they can choose, they chose that story from the book of Acts for this Sunday. It must be something important there. And it is. We find that Peter and the disciples were called to a small city of Joppa, not too far from Jerusalem, port city, because a woman passed away. Her name was Tabitha. It says, meaning Dorca. Now in the Greek, and those of us who are Greek, immediately we should know what's going on there. Just that one line. Dorcas, Dorcados, Dorcados, what is it? Elafi, a antelope. A deer, a female deer, antelope. That's what Tabitha means. The Tabitha is the Jewish name, Dorcas is the Greek name. So in the book of Acts, it says her name was Tabitha, but she was known as Dorcas, which is very significant here. They gave her a Greek name to the Jews, to the Jewish circumcised name of she wasn't circumcised, but entered into the Jewish tradition. Why? We see a little bit more in the story. In those days, they used to give animal names, especially to women, sometimes to men, that characterized their life. And Dorcas usually was given to a woman who was very beautiful. If she had beautiful eyes, she was very attractive, they may refer to her as Dorcas. But in this epistle, in this pericope from the book of Acts, the emphasis is not on her physical beauty, but on her spiritual beauty. And what is more significant than that, she is the only person, she is the only woman in the entire New Testament that is referred to as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Mathitria. It's the only time in the entire Bible that the word mathitria is used for a woman. Very significant, therefore, right? Here the disciples being called to a room, she passes away, her name is Dorcas, they come running to a room, Peter comes in, they had washed her body, she was dead up in the upper room, and he finds women around her, and they are all sorrowful and crying. But that's not what's significant here. What is significant is what they're wearing. What were the women wearing? Clothes that Dorcas, Tabitha, had sewn for them. And in the Acts, it emphasizes that Peter came in and he looked around and he saw them crying. Here she is, this dead, beautiful woman, this Dorcas. They ask him, come and see her. Who is this woman? He doesn't know. He goes and he sees all of these other, it says, widows and poor people. And they're wearing, they say, see the clothes that I'm wearing? She made them for me. And in the Greek, there's two words there for clothes. Hidona, and the other one, I don't remember now. Do you remember? Imatia, dimatia, yeah. So two Greek words. One means outside clothes, outer clothing, cloak. I think that's the way it's translated in the English, cloak. And the other word is inner garments. In other words, underwear. And they're telling Peter this. She did this for us. And he's so taken by this. It so inspires him that he says, you know what? We can't let this woman die. And he reaches out to her and raises her from the dead. Obviously, Jesus was the one who raised her from the dead through Peter. But I want you to see why he raises her from the dead. He would not allow, he could not allow kindness and generosity and caring to die. Here is a community, here is a woman who's doing all of these things for all these people. It's not that her body or her person is important. What she represents is important. Whenever I read this pericope from the book of Acts, I always say to myself how much we need, not only women, but usually it's women more than men, who serve in the church, who care for each other, who take care of other individuals. I've always wanted some church to say, you know what, we're going to start a society, or maybe a chapter of the Philoptolos, that we're going to be like Dorcas, and we're going to knit or sew clothes or embroider things, and we're going to ship them for free to third world countries. Or people in the area here, in the neighborhood, people who need clothes. How spectacular would that be? To be known as the church, the Annunciation Church of North Miami, and they have an organization of women and men who sew clothes for people that are poor, give it to them, in the image of Dorcas, of Tabitha in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. And it's even more powerful for you, because the real Dorcas, the original seamstress of the church, is the Panagia. The Evangelismos, the icon of the Evangelismos, when you go out, you kiss it, you see it over here. What is she holding in her hand? She is holding a yarn. Why? Because in the tradition of the church, as a little girl, when she was in the temple, that was her job. She would sew the tapestries in the church. She would sew the vestments of the priest. She would sew and take care of the katapetasma, the veil of the temple. That was her job. And so the emphasis is that she's constantly sewing, she's constantly fixing, she's constantly mending, she's making. Beautiful image of the church. She's the Tabitha. She's the original Dorcas of the church. Beautiful on the outside, beautiful on the inside, sewing, mending, embroidering kindness and love in the church. What greater image or example for us? So you say, you may have something there, Father Frank. What nicer thing to say that we have an organization in this church called the Dorcan, or whatever you want to call it, and we sew in the image of the Panagia because we are the Evangelismos, and we give out clothes just like Dorcas, the first Mathitria in the New Testament. Wow. That's got some meat to it. It's got some usia to it. It's not just fluff. It actually has power, and it has meaning. Why that's even more important is that in the book of Proverbs, Solomon said that the ideal woman, and I want to quote it to you, it's from the 31st chapter of Proverbs, verse 19, says that the ideal woman has in her hands wool, and she grasps a spindle and a needle with her fingers, and she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. Right from the book of Proverbs. And this verse, by the way, is used by the hymnographers during the Evangelismos in one of the hymns of the church. It's there. That's what she is. She is the ideal woman, the ideal creature of God, who has in her hands the things, not so much that she has wool. She uses her hands in order to knit, to make, to mend, to help the poor and the needy. The ideal person. And so we put her there in the icon, and we say, we honor you because we do the same thing. That's why Tabitha is a Mathitria in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. That's why Peter says we can't allow her to die. He raises her up because he knows, what is she going to do? She's going to continue doing the same thing. And the church says, what a great act, praxis. What a wonderful example for you who just got baptized during the time of the resurrection, to see as example Dorcas, so that you can do the same thing. You can do the same thing. Because this is the time in which we put new clothes on, don't we? When we are baptized. That's why Easter time we wear new clothes, we buy new clothes. Hidonami parashim fotinon, all of those images of clothing, of vesting, of changing ourselves, our morphe, all come theologically from the Bible and find their root in much of the iconography of the church. But if we don't know the stories, we lose out on that. Let me just mention to you in the Greek here, because it's powerful. So what phrase characterizes the life of Dorcas, Tabitha? Plidis agathon ergon. Plidis agathon ergon. Full. It doesn't, plidis is more than full. It's overflowing with good works and charity. Philanthropia, elimosini, it says in your translation there. Embroidering ourselves. So let me end with this. There's a fable. I like those stories, the fable stories. They have a lot of power to them. So here's a son, a young boy of a tailor. And the tailor is sewing. And that young boy comes and watches his father. And he sees very expensive scissors. Takes the scissors out and he cuts the cloth into pieces. And he puts the scissors down by his feet. And then he reaches for a needle. And he grabs the needle and he takes the cloths and he begins sewing them together. And after he has sewn them together, he takes the needle very carefully and he puts it in his turban. And the little boy says, I don't understand what you're doing. He says, what is it that you don't understand? He says, the scissors, very expensive. We need a lot of money. You need a lot of money to buy those scissors. And you keep them by your feet on the floor. And he says that the needle, which is very cheap, inexpensive, you can buy so many with what it costs to buy the scissors, you put in your turban by your head. Why, Father? And the father says, because the scissors cuts and separates, whereas the needle unites and creates. That is what should be near your head and your heart. And of course, the moral of the story is that there are two types of people in the world. Those who cut and separate, and those who mend and bring together and unite. So as we think about our own death and what we want to be known for, I myself would say, I hope that people will say, he was not a cutter. He was not a biting person. He was not a criticizing individual, always cutting and you know what I'm saying? You know the kind of person that I'm talking about. You hate being around them, that's all they do. They find the negative and that's all they talk about. They are scissors people. Or do you want to be known as being a Tabitha, a Dorcas, someone who uses a needle, just like the Panagia, to bring people together, to mend what is broken and torn, and to bring the chitona, the clothing of our Lord, back in love and compassion. May we learn from the generosity and from the love of this Dorcas, this Tabitha, and may we emulate her during this time of the Pentecostalium. Theos Jesus. Please rise.